You really want to know how far an HOA president will go over a doorknob? Try breaking into a pregnant woman's house for it. Patricia. That's what I said the last time she strutted off my porch, clutching her clipboard like a badge. Never mind that what she'd just done would have had anyone else arrested. But Patricia Kenmore wasn't just anybody, at least in her mind. She was queen of the bylaws, neighborhood sheriff, and, on a good day, your worst nightmare in a pantsuit. It all started with a notice about a smart lock. My smart lock. I'd built it myself, top to bottom. Because my wife Julia was 8 months pregnant and on edge after a string of break-ins nearby. This lock wasn't about streaming to the cloud, selling our info, or anything like that. It logged every attempt, kept everything local, and if you didn't have the right code, you weren't coming in, period. Patricia saw it differently. Violation 4.2.3, unauthorized entry hardware. She announced, shoving a folded letter into Julia's hand before my wife could even finish grabbing the Amazon box off the step. She snapped pictures, rattled off some nonsense about surveillance equipment, then started quoting bylaws that had been repealed last year. You ever had someone weaponize bureaucracy just because they can? If so, you know the feeling, a cold knot in your stomach. That has nothing to do with fear and everything to do with outrage. I tried to explain, but Patricia wasn't there for a debate. She was there to make a point. She could make your life hell with a signature and a smirk. I watched her walk away that afternoon, phone still out, snapping photos of our house like she was casing the joint. Julia was near tears, clutching the notice in one hand and the baby monitor in the other. That's when things got weird. That night, I checked the lock logs. Just a habit, really. 3 pings, all within 10 feet of the door, all from devices tied to HOA. Master keys. One showed an unlock attempt when Julia was home alone. Whoever it was, they waited outside, tried the door, and walked away. I didn't know yet that Patricia had one of those keys, or that she'd be bold enough to use it, but the suspicion was there. The next morning, I noticed yellow violation slips sprouting up all over the street. Our elderly neighbors, the Freemans, had a new citation for non-uniform window tint, which was actually medical grade. Fred just shook his head and grumbled, but I saw the worry in his eyes. Another neighbor got nailed for a solar panel, someone else for a faded fence. Patricia was tightening the screws, and the board was nowhere to be seen. I filed an appeal, backed by paperwork, compliance certificates, the whole 9 yards. Within hours, the HOA portal slapped us with a freeze order. No modifications, no fixes, just under review limbo. Julia stopped using the front door. Every little sound made her jump. She wanted to go back to a regular lock just to make the drama stop. I told her, no, this was about more than hardware now. Patricia started parking her car across the street at weird hours, just sitting there with the lights off. Sometimes she'd leave notes without envelopes. No signature, just bold threats. Non-compliance may result in administrative action. I started logging everything, setting up silent tripwires and encrypted backups. One night, I bumped into Elliot, the HOA treasurer, at the mailbox. He looked nervous, like he was in over his head. She's not asking permission anymore, he whispered. She just does what she wants. The board had no idea how often Patricia was out here, keys in hand, making up rules as she went. At the next board meeting, Patricia ran the show solo. Elliot didn't show. The meeting was all budget lines and policy updates. No mention of the freeze order. No talk of complaints piling up. When it ended, I waited for Elliot. Outside, he admitted Patricia had added an emergency access rule to keep the master keys on her at all times, supposedly for health checks. But there was no oversight, no record. He looked like he wanted to crawl out of his own skin. She's got us boxed in, he said, voice shaking. That night, Julia asked if I thought Patricia had actually come into our house. I told her the truth. I was almost sure she had. I watched Julia pull the baby monitor close, hand resting on her belly. For the first time, I locked our bedroom door at night. A couple days later, another citation turned up. Now we were being accused of excessive digital surveillance. The clause didn't even exist. But the message was clear: back down, or else. Julia stopped sleeping. I started pulling logs, checking for new scratches or signs of tampering. I found one by the doorframe. Fresh. Looked like someone tried a key, then left. I checked the cameras. but I disabled motion logging during the day. For Julia's peace of mind, I could have screamed. Elliot called me 2 days later. He'd left a flash drive in my mailbox. On it, a blurry photo of Patricia with the master keys, a draft of her. Schedule logging access to our house. Never submitted to the board, and a secret audio recording of her saying, "It's not a home. It's a threat," pretending to be compliant. That was all I needed. I called my brother, Ryan, a detective. He told me to secure everything, start a formal complaint. Things moved fast after that. Police got involved. The warrant came through. Julia tried to act normal, but the tension was eating her alive. Patricia started prowling at night, peeking in windows, even pressing her hand to the nursery glass. The sensor pinged straight to Ryan's phone. He was already watching. That Friday, cops hit the HOA office at dawn. Patricia tried to argue, but it was over. They took her keys, her logs, everything. Word spread fast. Elliot showed up at my house with a key Patricia had given him just in case. He apologized for not standing up sooner. I told him it was enough. Together, we built the case. Entry logs, emails, recordings, every overreach. Stacked in a file for the county prosecutor. The fallout was messy. Patricia's lawyer cut a deal. She'd forfeit all board positions, pay a fine, do community service. The HOA board passed new rules. No more emergency key access without oversight. No enforcement against pregnant women without unanimous approval. They even named a new clause after us, the Ellery provision, to protect homeowner security systems. 2 weeks later, our daughter Evelyn was born. The house finally felt safe, even if the silence was a little too quiet at first. Patricia didn't come back. The board changed hands. Neighbors started talking to each other again. We left the original violation notice taped inside the nursery closet, out of sight, but never out of mind. What happened to us? Could happen to anyone. Most folks don't have a detective in the family or the technical chops to call a bully's bluff. But I do. And I'm telling this story so you'll know what to look for the next time someone shows up with a clipboard and a smile, looking to turn your home into their kingdom. If you've got a story of standing up to HOA tyranny, drop it in the comments. Let me know where you're watching from. And remember, the only power that matters is the power you refuse to give away that you'd think that would be the end of it, right? Patricia out, new board in, and everyone suddenly neighborly again. But let me tell you, when you've spent months looking over your shoulder, waiting for the next shoe to drop, peace doesn't just waltz back into your life. It comes in slow, careful steps. Half the time, you're not even sure if it's real. That first week after Evelyn was born, I must have checked the lock logs a dozen times a day. Julia caught me once or twice, standing in the hallway with the monitor in one hand and a screwdriver in the other, tightening screws that didn't need it. She never said a word, just squeezed my arm and smiled, like she understood that after everything we'd been through, it was going to take a minute before normal felt safe again. Neighbors started stopping by, sometimes just to drop off a casserole, other times to talk. Vince, now acting HOA president, rang our bell with a box of old HOA paperwork and said, "If you see anything in here that looks shady, let me know." He was joking, sort of, but we both knew he meant it. People were rattled, but something had changed. The hush was gone. Folks were checking in, swapping stories about fines and weird letters, helping each other repaint mailboxes, replace fence boards, stuff nobody bothered with when Patricia was running the show. A week or two later, I was out front, changing the porch light, when Fred from across the street shuffled over with his cane. He didn't talk much, never did, but that morning he looked right at me and said, "You did a good thing, Marcus. Not just for you, for all of us." I can't even explain what that meant to hear. Coming from a guy who'd survived 3 recessions and a heart attack, but it stuck with me. It was like the whole neighborhood exhaled at once. But not everything fixed itself overnight. Julia still jumped at loud knocks. Sometimes she'd freeze when a car idled too long out front, hand drifting to her belly even though Evelyn was sleeping soundly in the crib. I'd reassure her, over and over, that we were safe, but some habits die slow. For a while, I thought about taking the system down, disabling the extra sensors, but I never did. Maybe I just needed the reassurance as much as she did. A few weeks passed, and life slipped into a new kind of routine. Diaper changes, late-night rocking, the quiet hum of the monitor. The HOA board, for once, was actually transparent. Elliot, now off the board, dropped by every so often just to check in. Not coming back, he'd say, holding up his hands. Just making sure you're still breathing. He looked lighter, somehow. Less like a man carrying secrets and more like somebody learning to forgive himself. One morning, Julia handed me the old violation notice, that crumpled 4.2.3 about the doorknob, and said, "Think you'll ever be able to laugh about it?" I just shook my head. Maybe, but not yet. I tucked it back inside the closet door, behind a box of baby clothes, a reminder that it all started with something as simple as a lock. Summer faded into fall. The Ellery provision held strong. No more surprise inspections, no more citations for unapproved hardware. Pregnant homeowners got an actual buffer. People started planting flowers again, walking dogs without watching their backs, waving at each other like they meant it. And yet, there was always a whisper at the edge of things, a sense that just because Patricia was gone didn't mean the system was fixed for good. At the next open board meeting, I stood up and thanked the board for the changes, but I also told them, plain as day, that nobody gets to turn fear into policy ever again, not while I'm around. Vince just nodded, looked me in the eye, and said, "We hear you, Marcus. We all do. Funny thing is, I don't think I'll ever go back to trusting blindly. Not after watching what one person with a clipboard and a chip on their shoulder can do if nobody calls them out. The difference now is nobody's staying silent. That's the gift Patricia left behind, unintentionally. People are awake. They're watching. Julia and I, we still walk the perimeter some nights, just for old time's sake, making sure the sensors are quiet, the house is settled. Sometimes, when the porch light flickers or a shadow moves in the cul-de-sac, I tense up. Old habits, you know. But then I look at Julia, at Evelyn sleeping safe in her crib, and I realize, we built this peace, we fought for it, and we're not letting anyone take it again. So yeah, maybe the real victory isn't that Patricia lost, or that the board finally got it together. Maybe it's this: neighbors know each other's names again, kids ride bikes in the street, and when somebody knocks on your door, you don't have to flinch. Not because the rules changed, but because we did. And if you're listening, wondering if standing up is worth it, wondering if you can make a difference against someone who acts like the rules don't apply, let me be the one to tell you can. You just have to start. That's how neighborhoods get their soul back. If you've been through something like this, or you're fighting your own battle, let me know in the comments. Tell us what you did, how you stood your ground. Let's keep the conversation going, because as long as we're talking, as long as we're watching out for each other, nobody like Patricia ever gets to run the show again. So hit that subscribe button if you want more stories about real people, real fights, and real justice. And drop your city or your story below. Because you never know, your next door neighbor might need to hear that they're not alone.